Доктор Орвилл работает в нашем университете почетным профессором уже несколько лет. Он знает всех здесь сидящих людей. And I hope that you will be very great moderator because you know everybody here. Please.
Good day, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you again here in Almaty. And the Professor Rector Akanov has managed again to say he's going to be one of the moderators, and then all of a sudden I find that I am the moderator. But I will take on the challenge. Today we have a very distinguished group of people that are here. Most were introduced this morning in the main plenary. We have sitting at the table at the front the Vice Minister, and it's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you. And I will introduce individually, after their session, our two distinguished speakers. Also, we have the representatives from all the rectors from all of the universities in Kazakhstan, the medical universities, and it's really a pleasure to see you all. Our subject today is on looking at achievements and challenges in medical education. We're focused on medical education, but we should never forget education of nurses, education of pharmacists, education of dentists, and education of other healthcare providers. Because doctors alone cannot run the healthcare system. And sometimes we put too much emphasis, I believe, only at looking at doctors. Today, we're focused on medical education, but at other times, I certainly hope that the focus will be on the other professions, sister professions, brother professions as well. It's critical for the development of healthcare in Kazakhstan as it is in other countries. Our first area that we're going to focus on is on quality assurance in medical education. I was fortunate during my years at WHO to work with WFME and also to be part of the development of standards. Not a significant part, because my part was to bring people together from my position in WHO to discuss the importance of standards. And not all countries were supportive of having world standards, because countries wanted to be independent. They wanted to set their own standards. And even some of the biggest countries in the world actually at first were resistant to any idea about a World Federation of Medical Education setting standards. We've now gone past that. We now have standards that people recognize. We now know that standards are important for quality, and that is what Professor David Gordon will be talking about. Professor David Gordon is president of the World Federation of Medical Education. He's ex-president of the Association of Medical Schools in Europe, ex-vice president of the Organization of PhD Education in Biomedicine and Health Sciences in the European system. and an honorary professor of this university, something I know for sure that he takes very, very seriously. It is important for us during this session not just to sit and listen. It's good to sit and listen and learn, but it's also important for us to think critically about what is being said and be prepared to participate. So after each speaker, I will invite for 10 minutes some critical questions and some replies after those questions. Is that agreeable to all? Yes? Oh, good. Thank you for replying. Sometimes people don't reply, and then I don't know what the answer is. But thank you for replying. Okay? Professor Gordon, please.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And there were two things that you said that really ring very importantly with me. The first is the need for us to think not just as one profession, but of all the professions together. When I was the Dean of the faculty in the University of Manchester, I had a medical school, a school of nursing, a school of pharmacy, and a school of dentistry. So I think it's really important to actually, at all times, to think that medicine is only one part of the system. The second thing that rang very true is that I really hope that there will be plenty of questions. I've deliberately not got many slides because I think every time I talk on this subject, many things are brought up in questions, and it's useful to have that opportunity. And I've been asked, that's interesting, I've been given the slides that I was talking to this morning. I'm capable of delivering this talk without the different slides, but no, it's not this one. Yes. I do have it here if the other copy can't be found. Нет. Нет, нет.
Его на флешке есть. Флешку возьмите. Флешку возьмите.
Флешку, да.
While this is getting fixed, I must tell you a story. I was once at a conference in Uganda, a conference organized by the World Bank. And during the conference, the lights went out in the middle of the presentation. And two people from the World Bank said, "What do you expect of Uganda? This is bound to happen." 2 weeks later, we were in Washington, and they invited all the ministers of health from about 80 countries. And the presentation started by the president of the World Bank, and the lights went out. And the Minister of Health from Uganda said, "What do you expect of the United States?" Yeah. So there are always technical problems.
And always best not cured by professors of medicine. I'm going to talk about standards, accreditation, and the recognition of accreditation. And I will talk about international developments in standards and in accreditation. I will talk about the recognition of accreditation, how we verify that the system is working right. And I will also talk about the way that we need to marry the local needs to the international standards. And I have here a headline from the Financial Times just a few weeks ago, where one of their columnists was making the point that the idea that everything is the same and everything is extremely big is not right. Sometimes we need to think small as well as thinking worldwide. Now, this slide I showed this morning, and I'm only going to concentrate on this part of it. The standards program for medical education, the way that we deal with accreditation and the recognition of accrediting agencies, and how we manage some essential databases, and in particular the World Directory of Medical Schools. Now, what is it that the World Federation cannot do or should not do? That's rather the things that we do. One is that we can't dictate exact standards or accreditation practices to individual countries or regions. As our chairman pointed out, it was very important at the start to have a worldwide set of standards for education, but we need to make sure that they really work and they're really applicable in the local context. So we can't dictate exactly everywhere. We almost never involve ourselves just with one medical school, because if we did that, we'd have no time to do anything else. And we very rarely work with a single country, but we tend to work with the region, and we have our members are the regional associations. When we do look at a single country, we tend to look at a single country because it's very large, or because it's very important, or because it's a pathfinder, that it's leading the way for other countries in the region and other associated countries, leading the way forward. And the World Federation does not act as an accreditation agency. We don't accredit systems. Now, there I am saying that we rarely work with a single country unless it's large, important, and a pathfinder. So why are we in Kazakhstan? And I think the answers are obvious. Of course, this is a large country. That's very easy to tell. It's extremely important because to establish good standards and good systems for accreditation in the former Soviet countries is a very important step to actually deal with that very large part of the world. And yes, obviously, this, I believe, is a pathfinder country. There is already close attention to standards in all the medical universities, and there is already accreditation well developed. And I think we have the prospect for Kazakhstan to be a real leader in the region. Now, the World Federation Standards for Medical Education, that's what the cover of the first book looked like. And their origin has been described. This was the first edition, published in 2003. And I'm talking mainly about the standards for basic medical education, what you do before you get your qualifying medical degree. We also have standards for postgraduate education and for continuing professional development, but I'm not going to touch on those anymore. And although the process of creating the standards was led by the World Federation, the main stimulus for them actually came from one or two individuals within WHO at the time. And this is worth quoting, that the purpose of the standards program is to provide a mechanism for quality improvement in medical education in a global context to be applied by institutions, organizations, and national authorities responsible for medical education. So we're not talking about what should be taught and learned. We're not talking about the curriculum, but we're talking about the standard to which it should be taught, the standard to which students should endeavor to learn. And The outcomes of the standards program have been very many, and I think almost entirely positive, and very widely used in the world. I use the example of the alphabet. Countries that use the WFME standard extend from A, Australia, to Z, Zambia. And the second edition of the standards has been prepared, so they've been brought up to date. They map onto the first edition, and they're available on the website. We don't put them in paper anymore. But it's very important for us to think about the future, and I think this will be one of the most important things I have to do while I'm at the World Federation. First and second editions were both prepared by my remarkable predecessor, Dr. Hans Kahler, but he will not be really so much involved as we go forward. And I think the two things that we are going to concentrate on in thinking of the third edition is to make sure that the standards remain practical. They've got a little bit bigger in the second edition, and we don't want to get them so big that they are unusable or not easily used. And the other, which is an idea which I've already had some discussions with other professions about, is that in practice, any standard that you have in medical education, very much of it would apply in education of nurses, dentists, pharmacists, and so on. So we are thinking about the possibility of having a common standard for all the professions in each area, and then on top of that, the things that would differ between medicine, nursing, dentistry, and so on. And that will be an interesting one to do, difficult, but well worthwhile. Now, following the second edition of the standards, we've had some negative comments about the way in which they have got a little bit larger. And so we have this important explanatory note on the website. First of all, to set out what the standards are based on current understanding and best practices, what they're intended to do. Those are, if you like, are already there. But we go on to say that each institution or regulator should review the relevant standards and develop a version of them that is appropriate for the local context. You've got to have the standards at the same level, but you will phrase them and use them in different ways in different places. But we say it would be helpful if those local contextual standards are mapped onto the original WFME standards. In other words, if a country has its own standards, we want to see how they fit together with the World Federation standards. It's important that not all standards may have application in every setting, because medical schools do differ very considerably. And it's also to say that a medical school may well receive a satisfactory overall evaluation and maintain accreditation without necessarily meeting every standard or substandard. The particular point here is that we have basic standards that really must be met, and we have standards for quality improvement, and one should aspire, one should hope to meet those standards for quality improvement, but it is not practical in every place at every time. Let me move on to accreditation. And accreditation came out, our involvement in accreditation came out of the standards program, as you've seen in the previous slide. And we sat down with the World Health Organization, and actually there is a joint WHO-WFME policy on accreditation of medical education, which is on our website. But accreditation, which is the certification of the suitability of medical education programs and of the competence of medical schools in the delivery of medical education, is clearly extremely important. Now, on one occasion when this was being discussed, a colleague from Africa said, how can you afford to spend money on evaluating medical education in this way if you can barely afford to run the medical school? And the answer came from my good friend and colleague, Dr. Ottmar Kloiber, and he said that to run a medical school without examining how well it is doing its job is like buying a car and hoping that it will get you to your destination, but not putting any oil in the engine to make sure that it continues running. And I think it's a very neat analogy. You've got to remember that you don't just have the machine, but you have the things that make sure that it will run smoothly. And continuing with this motoring metaphor, it does not matter whether you have a superb, new, fast, and very efficient car like this. This is probably the Kazakh National Medical University. You could have an old and stately one like this. This is possibly the Moscow Medical Academy, maybe. Or you can have something like this, and they will all get you to your destination. All those medical schools will get you to your destination, provided that there is all the time attention to the lubrication and the running of the machine. Now, that's all very well to say that we should have accreditation of medical education. We should examine it to make sure that it's working at the right standard. And that function is normally carried out either by a national government, by a ministry, or by national agencies that receive their authority from the government. But not every accreditation agency is working at the right standard. Some of them are very good, some are good, there are a few that are terrible. And so we have developed a program to examine whether or not an accreditation agency is working at the right level. And that's a very important thing, so that you know that the medical education examined by your accreditation agency in your country is at an acceptable level. We have the additional stimulus that the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates of the United States has said that for an applicant to enter the United States from abroad and practice medicine, after the year 2023, so that's 8 years from now, must have come from a school, a medical school that is accredited. And they go on to say either to the standards used in North America by the Liaison Committee for Medical Education, or by other standards such as those put forth, such as those managed by the World Federation. And that's a very powerful stimulus, because it means that national accreditation agencies are starting to come to us for an assessment of whether they are working as well as they should. The details of this recognition process are all available on the website, only in English, I'm afraid. The accrediting agency will contact us to make sure that they are eligible, and they must be specific for medicine. They can't be for just everything in the university. They must have expertise at looking at medical education. They complete an application. The form is available on the website again. We get into a dialogue with them to make sure that the application is complete and has all the supporting papers, and we arrange a time for the agency actually to be visited and observed at work. And we have send out recognition teams who will observe the agency conducting a site visit of a medical school and also discussing a medical school that they have already visited. And so we have two teams who are actually in the field at the moment, one dealing with an agency for the Caribbean and the other one actually in Korea today. They will produce a report. They will say whether or not the agency meets the standards. They will say if there's anything that should be improved, and then eventually it goes to a central committee of the World Federation to make a decision on whether or not it goes on our website as being recognized. As you can imagine, we are learning a very great deal while we go through this. There's a great deal of confusion. People are worried about how it's going to work, and they often are making up ideas of how it's going to work without having read what we've put on the website. Only last week, I discovered a paper that was being widely circulated in India saying what the World Federation wants is this, and it was almost entirely nonsense. Some people will continue to do that, so believe what you read on our website or go to someone who really knows how the World Federation works. We have one of the World Federation's advisors here, and if she isn't sure, I'm sure we'll be in touch and make sure that you get reliable information. We have to take particular care over conflict of interest, confidentiality, and the training of our recognition teams. We it costs money, and it's quite important that I keep an eye on that and make sure that the agency being assessed understands why it costs money and actually pays when they're asked to pay. There are some bad practices by some medical schools which we are just uncovering. For example, in the Caribbean, where there are a large number of private medical schools, we have discovered that some medical schools are hiring new staff for a year or two before they get their accreditation visit, and then are dismissing those staff as soon as their accreditation has been agreed. And so we're going to build in new safeguards against that sort of thing happening. And we will learn many, many more things. One bit of confusion I mentioned on the top line of this slide is whether the World Directory of Medical Schools is relevant to the accreditation process. And it is not. The World Directory of Medical Schools just says whether medical schools exist. It doesn't say anything at all about whether they are any good. Now, I said I would mention international developments, and I think this is easy. There's becoming much wider acceptance of the need for standards in those countries that were not using them now are coming into the fold. There is vigorous local development of getting those standards right, translating them into the local language, and developing accreditation mechanisms. We have, as you would imagine, a rapidly developing interest in international recognition of their accreditation, because medical graduates, almost all, will want at least to have the possibility of going to work in the United States. So the ECFMG pressure is very potent. We've already dealt with or are dealing with the Caribbean, North America, Korea, Australia, Japan, Thailand, and Iran, and many others. And I certainly wonder whether the system in Kazakhstan will soon develop to such a point that we could actually stage the process of recognition of your new accrediting agency. I think that would be a very important and useful thing to do. And you have to get the balance right, and sometimes an agency that would try and work in too many countries is not going to work. You've got to keep things small. Some of you will recognize The Allusion to Small is Beautiful, a very important book by Schumacher on how small systems often work better than very big ones. We have to continue to emphasize the need for the curriculum in particular, but also standards and accreditation to be appropriate locally. And that phrase there, that international compatibility can still fit with the local context and utility. And to conclude, I wondered about the right phrase, and as I mentioned this morning, our offices are in Ferney-Voltaire, and this is a statue of Voltaire. After Voltaire had lived in Ferney, they were so pleased that he'd been there that they included his name in the title of the town. And Voltaire, in his writings, actually does not say very much about medicine or medical education, but he does say this: men who are occupied in the restoration of health to other men by the joint exertion of skill and humanity are above all the great of the earth. They even partake of divinity, since to preserve and renew is almost as noble as to create. So medicine, the practice of medicine, and the other healing arts, nursing, pharmacy, and so on, are vitally important, and it's absolutely vitally important that we get the standards right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gordon. Accreditation is critical all over the world. In Canada, we have a common system with the United States of medical education accreditation. We consider that we have one of the best medical education systems in the world, and yet one of our medical schools was under serious probation for a couple of years. Not only were the medical education community worried, but the people that it serves in that particular province were worried. Because the people graduating from that particular medical school are the ones providing the critical services to that province. It's now out of probation. But the point I'm trying to make here, it doesn't matter the level of your healthcare system. You have to ensure that the quality of medical education is at the highest, and that your accreditation system mustn't assume that because the level is good, the school will be good. And we had a school that was on probation for a number of years. I support much of what, if not all, of what Professor Gordon has said. But now it's your turn to ask some questions. If we can have some questions now, and then we'll collect the questions, Professor Gordon, then perhaps you can answer the questions once they're collected. Questions, please? Yes, please, of course.
Okay, I can do it in English if you want. So, Professor Gordon, my question is about your point about the value or decision of that countries have to make about the choosing of development of local accreditation systems or use some international experience. Currently in our country there is a discussion going on this topic. I believe that the final decision of the government was that the Ministry of Education will accredit organizations who will provide accreditation for educational programs. None of them are specialized in medical education so far. So currently we are expecting the problem that we cannot accredit our medical education programs locally. And from your presentation, I understand that we shouldn't actually look for international accreditation systems, and better to develop some local accreditation models, and then try to apply for accreditation of World Federation. What would be your comment and recommendation on that? And the second question is, it's more or less global issue. We know we are facing during last years that there is a global labor market in healthcare area. We see labor force flows from continent to continent, and we see foreign doctors and nurses working in many countries. And there is always an issue of the quality of those professionals, the permission to enter the labor market. And in that context, do you still that there is this concept of developing local regional accreditation systems will fit this global trend rather than doing something, some international models? Thank you.
If I may, with your permission, I'm going to break my own rules and show my flexibility and ask Professor Gordon to answer these two critical questions immediately.
Yes. Thank you, Minister. Those are two very important points. First of all, on the specificity of an accrediting function for medicine, I think almost everyone in this room would agree that the kind of team that can assess a school of chemistry or of economics will not necessarily be skilled in assessing a school of medicine, partly because of the complexity of the subject, but very particularly because of the need to examine the teaching function not just in the buildings of the medical school, but education in the clinical facilities and hospitals that are used. And if you are not yourself an expert in medical education, it's very easy for a teaching hospital to hide things that it wants to hide from you. So that's why it needs to have medicine specificity. But of course, the medicine-specific function can be added on to a general system of accreditation. Should the system be local or international? Well, I think that's a very big question. If you take it to an absurd extent, there are countries with only one medical school, Moldova, Iceland, and in those cases it would be impractical to have a system that worked just within that country. So, for example, for Iceland, it will be sensible for them to work with the other Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and so on. In the particular case of Kazakhstan, with fewer than 10 medical schools, only 6 or 7, then you have the problem that you will not necessarily have. It will not necessarily be easy to put together a team who are sufficiently dispassionate, not biased, about any medical school. But on the other hand, because of the scale of the country and because of the way in which you are geographically separated a long way, I think this would be possible. I was actually privileged to be on an accreditation visit to the Medical University in Karaganda, and I was very impressed indeed by the rigor of that process and by the way in which medical education experts from other medical universities were able to distance themselves and to come to a very clean decision. So I think it should be possible within Kazakhstan. One thing to think of, I mentioned this country as a pathfinder, and that is that it may be that you will find that if you set up a system in this country, it could be extended to some of the other local countries. We have agreement that an agency in a big country can also, at the request of the government of another country, work in other countries as well. And this will happen to a limited extent, but it will happen. Your point about making sure that the need for the context to be considered when looking at standards and accreditation and how will that be compatible internationally, I think that's a matter of making sure that the core of standards that you require and the core of the accreditation process is absolutely at the common international standard, but then there will be detail which inevitably will differ from one context to another.
Thank you. I'd like to comment on your second answer. For a number of years, few years, I was the Director of Human Resources in WHO in Geneva. And this question came up about the movement of people and how do countries protect their doctors from fleeing once they gain the level, or how do they protect doctors with less skills and competences from coming into your country? I guess it was quite a debate, but the point that we agreed on was that accreditation should not be used as a tool for management of migration. There are two completely separate things. So when a minister of health in a country came to me and said, Orville, is it okay if I train my doctors at a lesser level so they can't go to the United States or Canada or the UK? My answer was categorically no. It is not okay. You must always endeavor to train your doctors to the highest level and be cognizant of what is necessary for your country. Because there are things that are required, for example, in SEMI, of your doctors in SEMI that are not required of doctors in Turkey. So it's important that you recognize those particular medical education needs. I would like to take at least 3 other questions. Quick, short questions, please.
Thank you very much for interesting presentation, Professor Gordon. I'm really impressed. And I have a question. Last month we had a congress in Kazakhstan, which our institution organized. It's CME or CPD in Kazakhstan. And the first main question was that what's the interaction between the main stakeholders, what the regulatory mechanism in our country should be. Is it license for CME or CPD for stakeholder, or accreditation curriculum, or accreditation of stakeholders, or another approaches was. And there we voted, and was several pathways, and it was a huge discussion where we provided every participants for stakeholders in our country. And that is the serious question in our country. What about talked our vice minister? It's the point is that in our country, providing CME by many companies which don't have any resource, and that is the government budget. And what is your suggestion? My question is. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an interesting and extremely difficult question. Obviously, I've talked entirely about what in UK terms is called undergraduate education, getting someone from high school to the stage where they get their practicing degree, their MD. And that's the single most important thing to be regulated and verified as being working at the right level. Regulatory mechanisms for postgraduate education, whether specialty training, from going from your MD to being a specialist surgeon, psychiatrist, or whatever, and regulatory mechanisms for continuing medical education and professional development are much more difficult. And it seems to me that the first step is for there to be a sensible agreement in each country, within the country, as to the nature of postgraduate training, the length and the stage to which the training must go before the individual doctor is considered to be a specialist. And I think this is a particularly difficult problem in former Soviet countries. I have worked on it in one of them, and it's very difficult to evolve to a state where you have specialist education at the right level and where you have a common standard that can be examined internationally. So a very difficult problem, but I will just say one thing, is that it's very important that we don't regard medical education as being something that lasts 5 or 6 years and then stops. We, all of us, continue learning for our entire professional lives, almost more than any other profession. I think that's one of the things that makes it so interesting, and it's one of the reasons why the older people still look young and excited, because you're learning something new all the time. So we must use that and get the, get a plan for assessment beyond the first graduation.
Yeah, we were talking about continuing medical education and continuing professional development. It's as you talking that that is the also postgraduate education which we're providing as well. But the discussion is that about the regulatory process about them, and there was post-Soviet countries institutions. Yeah, in our Congress, yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, quite difficult question. Thank you.
Yeah. If I may, it is a difficult question. One of the important things, though, is to decide whether or not the responsibility for continuing professional development will be the responsibility of the government or the responsibility of the medical associations? And where it's the responsibility of the medical associations, with the government watching the medical associations, you see that you have very effective systems across the world. The government has much too much to do. It must set the framework and then allow the profession to manage itself, which means you need strong medical associations that are not thinking about themselves, but thinking about the people. And then you can come up with regulations about pharmaceuticals, money, and closing that down, and making sure that the continuing accreditation support is the right type of support. But first, the key question is whether or not the government will regulate and manage, or the profession itself. Okay? So I'm going to invite Professor Seifert to come and speak. I'll introduce him in just a little while. And then at the end, we'll have a general discussion. But to make sure that he gets a chance to share with you the critical education of general practitioners and family physician, which is important, and all of a sudden has become one of the critical things. Like primary care is now growing again, and to deliver primary care, we need very good family physicians as the deliverers of primary care. Professor Seibert is Associate Professor, Head of the Department of General Practice of the First Faculty of Medicine, Charles University in Prague. He pays to live in Prague because it's such a nice place, so he gives some of his salary back to the university every year. Right? Should. Okay. He's has also been working for many years in different international networks, in working groups under WHO and WONCA. He has been a member of the European Society for Quality in Primary Care and served as Secretary of the European Society for Primary Care Gastroenterology. He has been the Czech representative in WONCA World and European Council since 2004. A lot of experience. Please.
Rectores, spectabiles, honorabiles, Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, it's a great honor for me to be here, and I would like to congratulate to the University for anniversary and also for all achievements presented this morning. So I'm going to speak about primary care. Can I have my presentation? Because I'm primary care physician, partly working still at the clinic and partly at the university. Okay. So in first slide, I would like. Okay. Okay, just to show you a picture from my country. It's much smaller than Kazakhstan. Its population 10.5 million, and this is my alma mater, my university, founded in 14th century with 4 faculties: medicine, law, theology, and free art. And this is my department. And on the right side, you see my clinic, which serves as a teaching clinic, either for undergraduates and postgraduates. And that's my career, my academic career. My research area is primary care gastroenterology, and especially screening for colorectal cancer. So I'm going to speak about pregraduate, postgraduate, and continuing medical education in primary care. The university medical education in the Czech Republic is in 8 medical schools, and all medical schools have 6 years curriculum, and majority of them work in traditional style, having theoretical, preclinical and clinical part, but 2 of them have problem-based teaching. We are not, from the point of view of academic general practice, we are not comparable with Canada or UK or the Netherlands. We are rather developing country from this perspective, but we are fully comparable with the best departments in Eastern Europe. Because academic career is still difficult for general practitioner, it has low financial attractivity for GPs, and the room in curriculum for primary care is still not enough. So my department is leading general practice department in the country. We teach not only primary care and general practice, but we are also responsible for practical skills of students and for psychosomatic disorders. We have 3 weeks in curriculum. We have a lot of foreign-speaking students, as you have here in Almaty. We try to behave like an ordinary department within university, so we not only teach, but do research, international project. We have PhD student, and we are involved in continuous medical education. Our best achievements are measurable. We give very good feedback from students. Our teachers are uploaded each year, and we are comparable in those activities I mentioned before. And the best achievement of us, that the general practice for the first faculty of medicine student graduates is one of the preferable career choices. But still, academic general practitioner in Czech Republic is a new kind of human, and it's not easy to assess in that competitive academic environment you can imagine. But we have what to offer to students and to the university, because we can offer one-to-one teaching in practices. We can bring students very close to patient, to physicians. Students can meet healthy people, not only ill people in their own environment. They can meet not only diseases, but also problems, and the problems are changed due to our knowledge and skills to syndromes and then diseases. So I think that we have strong message for students, and they understand. And I also think that we don't only teach about primary care, but we are a contribution for the education of students which can get in primary care. And I think for the development, for the career of any doctor, the experience in primary care is an ultimate condition. It is also the ultimate condition for the discipline as such, for the understanding of general practice within the medical community, with every physician in every discipline in the country, and also for the attraction of students to become GPs. But we have to provide best teaching, and we have to offer best practices to show to students, and that we succeeded in that. This is a picture, maybe you will see a similar pictures in many European countries, showing the aging of GPs. This is the case of Czech Republic, but even worse is in Switzerland, Germany, and in other countries. And I would like to show you one of kind of policies and intervention taken within the Czech Republic to face this problem. And one of these strategies was to increase the attraction of general practice, and you can do it by different ways. And one of them is support of academic departments, improve the pregraduate curriculum, and give best examples to students in training practices, and provide good information about GP career. Then the second was the implement effective postgraduate training. We had the length of postgraduate training was 3, 5, then 4 years, and finally we made a compromise, and our postgraduate teaching, postgraduate training is only 3 years long. But the advantage of this length is that it's payable by state. The training of GPs is quite complicated, and these 3 years are payable, so the government government agreed with the residency program, which is in function since 2008. I try to see in each student, in my teaching at the faculty, a potential GP. Students in 4th, 5th year, they try to find in themselves the different prerequisites for different disciplines, like surgery, internal research, genetics, and so. So I try to see the prerequisites for general practice. So there are human prerequisites, definitely, the patient's empathy. I say, if you are fascinated by illnesses, then become hospital doctor. But if you are fascinated by people, then general practice can be your choice. And when I send them to general practices, and I say, if you come to a full waiting room, you get sick, so you are not the right case for general practitioner. For today, modern general practitioner, also the communication skills, teaching skills, managerial skill, diligence, thoroughness are another characteristic which must the candidates find in themselves to be a good general practitioner. Another way how to speak about general practice to students, it's to look in 4th year, every student wants to be specialist. It's okay, we need a lot of specialists, but we also need somebody as Thomas Friedman, the American journalist and winner of the Pulitzer Prize, calls the synthesizers. People who are able to synthesize knowledge, and this is the being general rather than specialist. And so in my view, the general practitioners can be the great synthesizers in medicine. So let's come to specialist training. The specialist training was introduced after Alma Ata conference in '78, so it's a long time in function in the Czech Republic. And the qualification since '78 a condition for providing general practice and for the contract with insurance company. The content of specialist training is set by law, and the length is now 3 years. The 3 years is consensus between professionals and ministry in order to be payable. The residency program, it means financial support of specialist training in general practice. General practice is now the only discipline in the Czech Republic which has this kind of residency program. It's fully supported and paid by state. All other disciplines are paid by employing hospitals and so. And money goes through practice to trainees. We have a network of accredited general practices, and the accreditation is based on quality criteria. I served for 10 years as a chair of accreditation board at the Ministry of Health. The accreditation board is composed only from professionals or general practitioners, and there is a call every year for 100 to 130 residential posts every year, and these selected residential posts, these practices call for application for medical graduates or young doctors. So every year we have this 100 or 130 posts occupied by new doctor. The support, just for imagine, is about 1100 euro, which is not big money, but it's at least it's some kind of assurance. The content of specialist training is start with general trunk. The basic trunk is either internal medicine or general practice and lasts for 2 years and have a content which is described here: internal surgery, gynecology, and obstetric. After these 2 years trunk, there is some kind of qualification of which is clearly described what qualification doctor has. But to complete the training, there is another 1 year training in general practice with the general practitioner trainer. And in addition, there are courses, either obligatory and facultative, on different topics like emergency management, law, hygiene, and more of them are internet-based. So there are, some of them are face-to-face, but more and more of them are just internet-based, like e-learning, and the specialist training is finished by practical exam and then by theoretical exam at postgraduate school, whereas the GP board, again, GPs, experts are doing this assessment. One of the possibilities for the newly qualified GP, he can start a new practice, as we say, on a green grass, but it's more and more complicated. It's a difficult process. It's licensing, authority approval, local authority approval, contract with insurance, and in addition, the local GP have to agree that's a new guy starting a practice. So that's a more complicated approach. Easier is to overtake or buy established practice. You have to start with some debt, that's clear. Then you can stay, and more it happens as an employee of established general practitioner. That's how the practices are going bigger, because not all young GPs, especially women, want to start with the debt and buy a practice. They rather stay as employees. So the best practices are growing now. But it is the same trend I see in UK, I see in United States. Then they can work for healthcare chains. The chains is a new modality in Czech Republic. There are chains who mean trust of who buy practices and employ GPs, or to work for companies providing occupational care. But anyway, to be a GP is a good position in a labor market in Czech Republic, as we have a lot of offer from Europe, from the cradle of general practice like Ireland or Scandinavia. The whole Europe calls for GPs. That's a good situation. So if I should answer the question if general practice is an attractive discipline in the Czech Republic, so I would say yes. It's a private business based on contract with sick funds. It's a mixed reimbursement, capitation, and fee for service, and different bonuses. It's a self-managed professional development. People like us, so we have higher ranks of people, and it's a highly recognized and appreciated profession among population. But on the other hand, the reimbursement hardly balance the workload to have not only with clinical competencies, but with the managerial things in practice. We still have limited competence. We have, as you have, we have general practitioners for adults. There are pediatricians, there are ambulatory gynecologists, so our competence is lower than the competence of doctors, for example, in UK. If my light is broken, I have only two possibilities, either to do it myself or to pay somebody to do it. Our patients are spoiled, and the recognition is still not so good among other specialists, but it's getting better and better. I'm sure that if you want to increase the power and image of the discipline, like general practice, you have to offer all attributes of any other medical specialty for CPD mentioned here. So not only university education, be present there, to have a very quality postgraduate education, but also have a standard of good clinical practice, to run the continuous education, to have space for quality improvement, to employ doctors for teaching and also for research. This is ultimate condition for the good. And in addition to CME and CPD, and this is a professional responsibility, as Chair mentioned. This is not a governmental thing. The accreditation for CME is given by Chamber, and it's fully organized by association, by professionals. But in addition to CME, we are focused on the quality and safety issues in patient-centered care, in the IT development, and in the practice organization, which is very important. And I'm older and older, I see how practice organization is more and more important, either for the patient satisfaction, either for safety of patient, either for money I earn. So that's all very important. This I can see you the difference from 2005 and 2013, that our discipline developed somehow, because the book on the right is 5 times more weight. So we do something. I want to spend a few seconds on CPD. This is a European directive which says that member states shall ensure, by encouraging continuous professional development, that health professionals are able to update their knowledge to maintain safe and effective practice. The continuing medical education, or CPD, activities cover the whole professional life, as was mentioned, and it's the same for general practitioner. And the main purpose of recertification, of licensing of individual GP, is provision of high quality, safe and trustful patient health care. That's very important. And I want just to look at the recertification process as a process through which registered health professionals demonstrate periodically that their knowledge is up to date. It can be exam, like examination, or it can be other. In most European countries, it's just proven participation with CME, as it is in Czech Republic. So we have many CME providers. It's a competition. It's a big competition, but our Society of General Practice, as the strongest association, scientific association in the country, has a hegemonial role in that. We have a regional infrastructure with regional GP coordinators, which is developed by society and managed by society. We have high attendance of CME activities. We have twice a year national conference, and the mainstream is introduction and implementation of practical guidelines made by ourselves, by GP society. The CME points are registered by the society, so I receive once in 5-year diploma, which hang on my wall, that I fulfill the criteria for recertification. It's not a subject of control. There are no sanctions if you don't have it, but you can be awarded by a bonus to capitation. So it brings me money if I fulfill with this need, and it can play a role in case of malpractice. If you make a mistake, if you make a problem, but so it can be easier for you to face the problem. When you look throughout Europe, so the formal recertification process is in function in 23 countries. Maybe Professor Gordon will have maybe better information. These are information from EURACT, which is a European Academy of Teachers in General Practice. And out of 23 countries, in 17 European countries, this recertification is mandatory. And it's mandatory in 6 Western countries and 11 Eastern European countries. So if you look at this map, you see the red, they have no recertification process. The green, like Scandinavia, Czech Republic, we have voluntary recertification, and that blue countries have mandatory recertification in 5 years or different number of years period. So these are the periods. In Czech Republic it is 5 years, and it's most common in 14 countries from Europe. This recertification, relicensing period is 5 years, and you see a lot of variation from 1 year to even 7 years in Slovenia and in Serbia. So that was what I wanted to say you to turn your attention to primary care, which I mean is a very important in pre, post and continuing medical education. The last slide is invitation for the biggest occasion in the Czech Republic in 2017, the European Conference of WONCA. So because 18 Kazakh doctors visited the world one in 2013, so I'm looking forward again for you to come to Prague. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Seifert. It's primary care and the training of primary care physicians be they called general practitioners or family medicine physicians, is critical for the development of our healthcare systems. In Canada, 50% of healthcare professionals, of medical doctors, are family physicians. 50%. It is a policy. We have training positions that allow 50% for specialties and 50% for family physicians. And we find that balance works for our country. And in the United States, it's different because they measure primary care in a different way. Pediatricians are also counted as primary care physicians. Also some general internists are primary care physicians. What's happening in our country is a lot of family physicians now have special competencies in other specialties. So not only do they do general family medicine, but they can also do some special competency in psychiatry, special competency in pediatrics, etc. I would like to give the first question to the Vice Minister because he has to leave for another engagement, and then we'll have 2 or 3 questions, and then we have 3 discussants who are prepared to make some comments.
Thank you. Actually, it's not a question, it's more or less comment that I would like to make here to my colleagues. And if you don't mind, I will make it in Russian. Okay? Уважаемые коллеги, я просто хотел бы извиниться в связи с тем, что там еще несколько встреч у меня до вечера, я должен уйти сейчас, но я хотел бы просто комментарий сделать. Ну, во-первых, мне очень понравилось в последнем докладе профессора Шифреда о той роли ассоциации специалистов общей практики, которая есть в Чехии. И мне кажется, что мы очень сильно, так скажем, недооцениваем или не уделяем должного внимания профессиональным объединениям как специалистов в отдельных специальностях медицинских, сестринских, так и в целом, вот, например, специалистов в сфере управления или образования. В этой связи я хотел бы вот, обратиться к вам, помочь нам, Министерству здравоохранения и социального развития, выработать некие критерии, на основе которых мы могли бы строить дальнейшие взаимоотношения с профессиональными нашими объединениями. Я знаю, их очень много, и они у нас действительно основаны на разных подходах. Вместе с тем, вот недавно, вы знаете, вышел закон о саморегулирующихся организациях. И в целом тренд такой, что в нынешних условиях и в целом на данном этапе развития государства, скажем, настроено более активно работать с неправительственным сектором, с профессиональными объединениями и так далее. Поэтому все ваши предложения будут хорошо восприняты. Если можно, не откладывать их на потом, а вот в ближайшее время свои предложения направить ко мне лично. Бертанов, Mail.ru, это очень просто, или в Департамент науки и человеческих ресурсов. И еще одно предложение, которое вот сегодня мы перед этим встречались с нашими уважаемыми руководителями медицинских вузов, и поднялся вопрос о необходимости, я не знаю, создания ассоциации медицинских вузов и вообще работников сферы образования. Дело в том, что вот мы очень часто испытываем затруднения как государственный орган и регулятор при принятии политических решений, а мы их вынуждены принимать ежедневно, в том, что эти решения должны быть, скажем так, доказательные, да, evidence-based. И, к сожалению, мы часто в спешке вынуждены принимать решения на основе экспертного мнения, то есть отдельных экспертов, там, института главных специалистов, и не всегда это действительно оправдано. В этой связи мы сейчас хотим, так сказать, активизировать, опять же, роль именно профессионального мнения сообщества и, скажем, вырабатывать эти мнения не спонтанно, там, срочно, а постоянно, и иметь некий совместный план действий, да, то есть совместный план реализации. И я бы хотел, как бы, здесь тоже выразить свою готовность от имени Министерства здравоохранения, Департамента науки и человеческих ресурсов, поддержать вот создание таких объединений, их дальнейшую, так сказать, диалог с Министерством здравоохранения и социального развития, для того, чтобы мы могли работу строить совместно. Мы готовы со своей стороны быть более восприимчивыми к предложениям, критике. Мы в ближайшее время хотели бы даже выработать некие критерии к вот, саморегулирующимся организациям, к ассоциациям. Не все из них действительно удовлетворяют там, сегодня международным стандартам. Я бы хотел обратиться здесь присутствующим нашим партнерам из-за рубежа, помочь нам в выработке таких критериев. То есть мы бы хотели, чтобы были у нас ассоциации сильные, они могли действительно представлять мнение профессионального сообщества, они должны быть прозрачными, они должны быть, так скажем, так, действительно отражать мнение большинства. И с такими ассоциациями мы будем и готовы работать, и они у нас должны быть всегда рядом. Сегодня у нас есть Национальная палата здравоохранения, и мы очень часто к ним обращаемся. Но в связи с тем, что как бы, направление работы достаточно специфическое, в большей степени это, скажем, экономическое развитие отрасли, а вот именно вопросов клинических, вопросов развития медицинского образования мы не слышим. Может быть, не потому что не умеем слышать или не хотим слышать, но хочется, чтобы оно звучало. И вот дальнейшие программы по модернизации медицинского образования мы построили совместно с учетом мнения именно людей, которые непосредственно работают в этой сфере. Вас, уважаемые коллеги, мы хотим действительно создать хорошие условия для того, чтобы мы с вами, и вы в первую очередь, могли реализовать свой потенциал и вместе достигать тех задач, которые сегодня мы поставили в нашей государственной программе. Еще раз спасибо за внимание. Прекрасный доклад. Я думаю, вот есть много чему поучиться. Уважаемые коллеги, если позволите, я позже к вам непосредственно сам обращусь по электронной почте с вопросами. Спасибо.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? There must be questions. Please. Can we have a microphone, please?
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Louisa McNutt, and I'm from the United States. And I apologize, I do not speak Russian. I enjoyed your talk very much. I would like to disagree with one thing you said and then ask a question. So you said that as what you call general practitioner, in my country we call family practitioner, that you have lower competency. And I disagree. I think the truth is that you're a generalist. And so one example would be you are equally competent to deliver a baby from a woman who is not high risk. If a 45-year-old woman was going to have triplets, you would send her to an OB specialist. But for the primary care that most people need in our societies, you're equally competent to do those jobs. And in fact, a very interesting paper in JAMA has gotten a lot of conversation in my country. It shows that when the national cardiologists and cardiac surgery associations have meetings, that mortality rates in our hospitals go down for heart disease related events. And in fact, it brings up the issue that sometimes less is healthier and better for the population. And we can debate the adventurous interventions that happen when they're in the hospitals, but I think that's a really important finding. So just to let you know, this seems new to me from a Kazakh position. I also work in Georgia and Mongolia. In the United States, after 4 years of medical school, you get a degree in medicine. After 1 year of practice internship, you can get licensed. You can practice any kind of medicine in your state. You're not specific to pediatrics. You're not specific to adults. Now, there's a lot of insurance companies that won't pay you, a lot of hospitals that might not let you work there without more extensive training. But a medical degree is far more general. So this is really, I think, what GP is. And this is something that doesn't seem like it can happen in Kazakhstan yet, but would be very advantageous. The piece that was missing to me, although maybe buried in the word psychosomatic, is that in my country we think 50% of primary care visits have a psychiatric basis, mostly depression and anxiety. And our primary care doctors, both pediatricians and adults, prescribe psychiatric medications for these diseases and refer more complicated diseases to psychiatrists. Are you allowed to do that now in the Czech Republic? You didn't have psychiatry up here as one of the areas for rotations.
Thank you very much for the question. You are right with the first part of your comment. I just wanted to explain that we have divided care, technically divided. I can register only adults, and my wife, she's a pediatrician, she can register only children. That's how it works in this part of the world. Yeah, that was. And the second, I did not detailed overview, but we have 2 months.
Microphone is here. I cannot resist not to ask my questions. So, is this correct that you have like GPs for adults and GPs for children? Oh, this is very interesting, because here we have GPs, and although they are called GPs, but formally they were trained as internal medicine specialists or pediatricians or OBGYNs, they are still very, very resistant to take care of other populations, like pediatricians do not want to deal with adults and vice versa. So this is maybe the way to overcome this kind of resistance and issue. And my second question is about medical education and Bologna process. From your presentation, I see that you are not part of this Bologna process. Is this correct? Thank you.
To answer the first question, there are a few papers in the literature about the transition process in East European countries. From all post-Soviet countries in Europe, only Estonia implemented family medicine system. All the other countries kept children specialists and adult specialists in primary care. So it means that I can treat children, but I can't register them, and my wife can treat adults, but can't have them on the list. That's how it works.
Which means he doesn't get paid for them. Yeah. Okay. We've got. Thank you very much. I think that's. I'm really tempted because this is an area that's really interesting for me, and I've done some work, but I won't say anything. But because we have 3 prepared speakers and discussant, I'd like. No, I thought that was an internal discussion, and later we will put them in a room by themselves and have them fight. But that's okay. I think I recognize the Okay, now I would like to invite at this stage, first, instead of inviting the high official, I will invite the intern, if that's okay. All right. So I would like to invite Dr. Toksim Kazai to first speak. Is he here? No? On the third, the intern. Not here? Ah, yes.
Where is Professor
No, I want her to speak first. She's the most important. Please.
Thank you. Добрый день. Моя презентация называется «Подготовка ВОП глазами интерна». Yeah.
Can we have the presentation, please?
Yes. Yes.
Is it good?
Yeah. После окончания бакалавриата передо мной стоял выбор, какую же специальность мне выбрать. Да. После окончания бакалавриата передо мной стоял выбор, какую же профессию мне выбрать, какую специальность. Я выбрала ВОП, потому что после резидентуры мы можем выбрать любую специализацию. И после 2 лет интернатуры мы можем работать, обрести независимость и самостоятельность, и, соответственно, получать хорошую заработную плату. Мои цели – это профессионализм, востребованность, умение работать в команде, самообразование и уверенность. Все эти качества необходимы для работы ВОПа. Ой. Нет. Вот. Ежедневно, конечно, несмотря на пробки, на трафик, на раннее утро, я всегда иду на занятия, потому что у нас очень непринужденная обстановка и очень интересные занятия. За 2 года интернатуры врач ВОП должен освоить более 10 специальностей. Наша практика заключается в том, что мы ведем прием вместе с нашими преподавателями, работаем в кабинетах функциональной диагностики, участвуем в разборах вместе с узкими специалистами, работаем в домах ветеранов, в домах престарелых, в детских домах, в хосписах. Также мы выезжаем на активы на дому. Работаем с медицинской документацией, с порталом, отрабатываем свои практические навыки в ЦПН, как сказать, участвуем в скорой неотложной медицинской помощи, мы там тоже как бы связана наша профессия с этим. И ведем профилактическую работу. Наша профилактическая работа заключается в том, чтобы мы проводили скрининг, работали в домах ребенка, проводим дни здоровья, работаем также со школьниками в средних и высших учебных заведениях. Одним из главных качеств врача ВОП является умение работать в команде. Мы всегда участвуем в консилиумах, врачебных конференциях, клинических разборах, участвуем в осмотре с профессорами и доцентами. После активов на дому, после клинических разборов мы сами вместе со своими коллегами организуем консилиумы и дебрифинги как бы внутри нашего коллектива. Также мы участвуем в научных конференциях. В течение 2 лет интернатуры мы участвуем в научной работе. После этого эта научная работа у нас, с этим научным докладом мы выступаем на кафедре, в университете, получаем соответствующие награды и публикуемся. Также мы знаем такие инновационные методы, и мы готовимся на основе этих инновационных методов, такие как Pauton, Prezi и Mainted Map. Также мы, интерны, можем провести свое занятие, но только наш преподаватель дает нам тему, мы готовим тесты по MCQ, составляем ситуационную задачу, и после одобрения нашей работы нашим преподавателем мы самостоятельно ведем свое занятие. То есть это такие методы, как интеллект-карты, PBL, CBL, SBL, перевернутый класс и TBL. Также нас посещают визитинг-профессора. Они делятся с нами особенностями их работы в их странах. Также мы с ними участвуем в осмотре пациентов. Один из наших студентов побывал по программе академической мобильности в Чехии на кафедре ПМСП. Чтобы обрести уверенность после окончания нашей интернатуры, эту уверенность в данный момент придают нам наши кураторы, которые с нами в течение 2 лет. Наши кураторы – это наши учителя, коллеги, наставники, товарищи и образцы, конечно, для подражания. После окончания интернатуры мы знаем то, что наши преподаватели не оставят нас, и мы всегда можем с ними связаться с помощью WhatsApp или других средств связи. И мы знаем то, что они всегда выезжают на выездную консультацию своих выпустившихся выпускников. Секунду.
Только вот это нажимай, ладно?
Угу.
Экран нажимаешь, он все выключится.
Хорошо. Ну и в итоге мне бы хотелось сказать, что ВОП – это первый контакт пациента с медициной. Угу. И в конце хотелось бы внести наше предложение от интернов. ВОП – это очень сложная профессия, и нам бы хотелось, чтобы престиж этой профессии повысился. Чтобы повысить престиж этой профессии, нам необходимо повысить критерии отбора в эту специальность. То есть, соответственно, в эту специальность должны идти самые лучшие студенты. Также хотелось бы сказать про введение постоянной выездной практики и расширение академической мобильности преподавательского состава и самих интернов. И поступайте все на ВОП.
Thank you very much. That was very good. I just wanted to make sure that we heard from the people who are being directly affected by the training. Now I'd like to invite Professor Kasbek to make comments.
Спасибо, Орвил. Уважаемые коллеги, в основном здесь мы сами, поэтому, наверное, многие вопросы я пропущу, потому что мы которые разбирали эти вопросы хорошо, поэтому я постараюсь пройти быстро. Я понимаю, да. Уважаемые коллеги, мы все в 2012 году приняли концепцию повышения качества образования, и мы определили, что это мы можем достичь через интеграцию в мировое образовательное пространство. Мы несколько раз пересматривали, отчитывались с ученым советом перед. И вот сейчас мы находимся на втором этапе реализации нашей концепции. Мы как бы для себя определили, да, вот здесь, направления и механизмы. Я тоже на них не хочу останавливаться. Вот то, что красным выделено, это те аспекты, которые я хотел бы сейчас синтегрировать на какую-то проблему, которая у нас есть и которую мы могли бы, скажем, решить через какие-то пути, которые мы в целом примем. Это вот, пожалуйста, это вот тоже наша концепция. Теперь мы приняли модель, компетентно-ориентированную модель обучения. У нас есть независимая оценка. Мы на подготовку программы приглашаем наших работодателей. Большое внимание сейчас уделяем клиническому обучению. Естественно, мы поэтапно переходим на интегрированные образовательные программы. Вот здесь я хотел бы подчеркнуть, что сейчас перед собой мы ставим задачу все-таки интегрировать вертикально все программы, все этапы. Это бакалавриат, интернатура, резидентура, чтобы мы знали, с чем наши студенты поступают и с какими знаниями и навыками они выйдут. И здесь же еще, кроме вертикальной интеграции, мы сейчас решаем вопросы горизонтальной интеграции. Но то, что на третьем курсе горизонтальной интеграции, это практически во всех вузах в Казахстане, а вот то, что на уровне 4-го курса, это пилотный проект наш. В настоящее время вы в курсе тоже отчитываемся. У нас 5 блоков, и мы стараемся тоже интегрировать основные направления вот на уровне основных нозологий, на общих принципах лечения, развивая клиническое мышление наших студентов. Это внутренние болезни, детские болезни, хирургические болезни, акушерство, гинекология. Здесь мы показываем наше дуальное обучение, но оно не стопроцентно дуально, но мы пытаемся. Здесь видно то, что мы в разработке образовательных программ приглашаем наших работодателей как экспертов, и приглашаем их на экзамены независимые, и, конечно, чтобы они обучали наших студентов. И то, что отличает наш университет, возможно, других, что мы имеем 3 филиала, об этом было уже сказано, и начиная с 4-го курса всех интернов, резидентов мы отправляем на эти филиалы, чтобы они отрабатывали. Здесь вот минусы. Это отсутствие, конечно, многопрофильной клиники. Это слабая материально-техническая база, мы об этом знаем. И по ГОСО мало времени все-таки уделяется на практику, в отличие от стран ЕС или других развитых стран. Но у нас есть надежда. Вы знаете, сейчас разрабатывается конституционный проект частно-государственное партнерство по строительству 300-коечной клиники. И если все пойдет по плану, к 2020 году мы должны получить суперсовременную клинику со всеми оснащениями. Будем надеяться. И здесь проблема, конечно, мы сейчас работаем, опять же, обращаясь к нашим партнерам. Это партнер университет клиник. Какой модели мы пойдем, с каким именно партнером мы должны работать в этом направлении. И в условиях кризиса, уважаемые коллеги, она затрагивает, очень больно, конечно, это ударило нас по мобильности. Если на эти средства года 2 назад мы могли пригласить до 200 визитинг-профессоров, в прошлом году мы могли около 100, а в этом году всего лишь 60. Поэтому, конечно, мы тоже должны эффективно использовать. Для этого все равно есть какие-то проблемы. Это проблема, что все равно есть у нас различия в образовательных программах между различными вузами, особенно вот зарубежными вузами. И, конечно, вопросы мобильности. В основном мобильность получается, что в одну сторону. Мы в основном приглашаем, например, 100 визитинг-профессоров, но выезжает от нас всего лишь 10-15. И, конечно, точно так же студентов. Мы тоже, мобильность очень большая идет, но внутренняя не идет. Поэтому, конечно, наряду с теми ресурсами, которые есть у университета, мы должны выходить на другие международные проекты. Здесь опять же вопрос, что действительно эти ресурсы теперь мы должны использовать более целенаправленно, более узко, определяя наши приоритеты. Сегодня мы уже определяемся этими приоритетами. Это для нас сахарный диабет, это вирусный гепатит, это подготовка врачей общей практики, это сестринское дело, общественное здравоохранение и более целенаправленно использовать наши ресурсы. И в целом, самый главный вопрос – это партнерство с международными вузами, желательно мирового класса. И здесь вы видите, мы пытаемся в целом и сестринское дело приблизить к международным стандартам с помощью наших партнеров. Из той же Чехии, Карлов университет, или же, вот, пожалуйста, Литва, Литовский институт здоровья. И сейчас такие же проекты есть в Финляндии и Великобритании. Трехязычие, я даже не буду останавливаться. Сегодня Айкан Аканович говорил, в этом направлении у нас уже 3-й год своя программа есть. Не было до этого законодательной нормативной базы. Мы утвердили это своим ученым советом, работали. На сегодняшний день все эти вопросы прорабатываются, поднимаются на уровне страны. И в целом, да, еще один момент, конечно, мы пытаемся повысить потенциал наших преподавателей. Для этого у нас есть модель своей компетенции преподавателя. И, конечно, мы создали кафедру педагогики, медицинском, фармацевтическом образовании, чтобы обучить наших коллег этим технологиям. Конечно, за базу мы взяли проект Всемирного банка и адаптировать для себя. И в целом вот это вот путь, к которому мы хотим пройти и достичь интеграции мировой образовательного процесса. И в целом, вот я хочу заключить свое выступление, что перед нами стоит задача системной модернизации всего медицинского фармацевтического образования Казахстана на пути ведущих зарубежных университетов. Для этого нам и нужны партнеры. И второй, мы четко должны определиться стратегическими партнерами. На сегодняшний у нас более 100 партнеров из более 40 стран. А результаты, поэтому нам, как Назарбаев университет, надо четко определиться стратегическими нашими партнерами. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. Now for our last intervention. The last intervention is Professor Begim Betova. Reza? And Dina and Chopin. They here also? You value yourself?
Уважаемый президиум, уважаемые участники круглого стола, я хочу очень кратко сказать, потому что до меня уже многое сказано. Ну, потребности общества определяют нашу стратегию. И здесь идут компетенции, которые весь университет наш пользуется, но мы немножко его модернизировали. Сейчас к этому я вернусь. Но подготовка, видите, врач общей практики должен работать и с папой, и с мамой, и с ребенком, и быть коммуникативно настроенной. Это как везде, но у нас еще очень важно. Чуть не туда нажала. Общеврачебная практика, очень много специальностей об этом говорили. Образовательные программы имеет значение анкетирования и отзывов интернов, имеет значение анкетирования руководителей, кто принимает нашу продукцию. Образовательные программы, ориентированные на ГОСО, утвержденных государством. Дальше используется у нас очень много подразделений, не только поликлиники типовые и с амбулаторными кабинетами врача общей практики, выезды, поликлиники города, стационары на дому и дневные стационары. Это совершенно новая форма работы, особенно стационары на дому, которые имеют свои конкретные показания, противопоказания, критерии. Это вообще очень непростая работа в том плане, что есть конкретные расписанные требования. И это только можно отработать и увидеть на этом этапе. И вот здесь создание мобильных кабинетов ВОП в Центре практических навыков. Мы очень широко используем Центр практических навыков. Нам он очень нравится, помогает. И вот в последнее время мы решили вместе с Центром практических навыков, с руководством университета, организовать мобильные кабинеты для врача общей практики. Это одно. И почему? Потому что поликлиническое звено, амбулаторное звено дает очень много. Это больные конкретно, это практика конкретно. Но есть и свои моменты. Неполное оснащение, требуемое во время обучения, неполная документация, потому что действующие документы, как говорится, живые документы, медицинские. А вот Центр практических навыков нам дает возможность использовать стандартизированного пациента, создавать реальную клиническую ситуацию по заданному диагнозу, по заданному уровню тяжести и так далее. То есть, все врачи, клиницисты здесь все это понимают. Оснащение полное, как мы хотим. потребность. Ну, конечно, это нужно готовить. Это, конечно, большая подготовительная работа преподавателя. Но очень широко используем интернов. Именно привлекаем. И видите, вот она, Мироль выступала, она очень в этом плане ориентирована. Документация врача, полный доступ. Это тоже очень важно, потому что документация, вы сами знаете, сегодня современная. Использовать портал, оформлять документы портал, НАМСЭК, больничные листы и так далее. Вот мобильный кабинет вот работает, один из примеров. Инновационные преподавательские методы. Об этом все знают, все говорят. Но вот интерн в роли преподавателя немножко хочу заострить на это внимание. Здесь мы готовим все вместе с интернами, но интерн должен быть хорошо подготовлен, ясное дело. Иначе это, сами понимаете, все это будет смазано. И вот здесь он готовит заранее, группа тоже подключается к этому. И очень используем, вот я вначале говорил, пятикомпетентность у нас в университете требования, и мы соединяем когнитивные, практические навыки, самообразование, правовые вопросы, потому что в поликлинике, в амбулатории очень много правовых вопросов, начиная с объема обследования, гарантированного объема, с лекарственных препаратов бесплатных, дальше больничные листы и так далее, и так далее. Портал, кого куда госпитализировать, кого куда направлять. Это все идет правовые вопросы, все решает правовые вопросы. Врач, наш выпускник, должен быть к этому готов. И кроме этого мы даем по заданному диагнозу и тесты готовят по MCQ, интерн, набор. Подключаются 2 или 3 еще других интернов. Они готовят 1 или 2 человека, 3 человека одну задачу по всем требованиям. Дают на рецензию друг другу. И затем это заключение обсуждается, а группа решает, правильно ли сам составил интерн, правильно ли рецензию сделали адекватную, и потом общее суждение. Вот эта работа, она, конечно, очень нагрузочная для преподавателя, но она работает. Интерны за свою задачу, за свой тест, за свою формулировку очень переживают. Вы знаете, потому что они к этому готовятся очень основательно. Если они хорошо сделали, получают колоссальное именно профессиональное удовольствие. Ну, профилактическая работа, об этом сказали. Дальше интернатура, вот мы делаем, участвуем, документы заполняем, которые потом в практической работе ему сразу же нужно будет использовать. У нас также бакалавриат, интернатура, резидентура, особенно сейчас. И хочу сказать, доступ к выпуску идет через, вернее, к работе будущей, идет через сдачу практических навыков независимой комиссии с аудио-видео записью самого процесса и идет с независимым тестированием, который идет совершенно независимо от нас, тесты неизвестны, комиссия совершенно незнакомая, совершенно независимо в полном объеме. Кто пропускал через себя этот экзамен, кафедра какая и интерны, они получают колоссальное удовлетворение, если все благополучно, и расстройства, если какие-то есть прорехи. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you very much, Professor. Just before we all leave, I would like to thank all of you who stayed and listened and participated. I think we had a very important set of discussions here today. Discussions that will require not only the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, but also much stronger associations, much stronger non-professional or non-governmental organizations. But that's not enough. It requires each of you as professors, as students, as interns, to begin to ask more critical questions. Don't just accept. Ask why. Ask how should we do this? Why should we do this? Is there a better way to move forward? How do we want our university to move forward? What do we want our education to be? Not just accept what somebody says, but ask why. And I was very pleased with the last presentation as you went through the different areas. And in that, I'm sure in the new spectrum of what you teach, the competencies that you teach, that not only law, but I hope and I'm sure that you mean ethics as well as law. Because it's critical that doctors behave in an ethical way. So I'm sure that you teach ethics as well as law. And so I'd like to now ask Professor in charge of Vice Rector to make presentations to our honored guests.
Уважаемые коллеги, я понимаю, что все устали, но я думаю, была сегодня хорошая дискуссия. Мы прослушали, обсудили много концептуальных вещей, которые требуют осмысления. И, конечно, мы недавно проходили одну международную аккредитацию, в общем, понимаем, что это необходимо делать. И мы на этом пути. Я думаю, мы придем к какому-то консенсусу с нашим правительством и между собой, и, может быть, с помощью ассоциаций и с помощью наших коллег. Но разрешите мне от имени руководства нашего университета вручить письма благодарности нашим спикерам Дэвиду Гордону. Ну, Дэвид Гордон уже наш, он не первый раз, а вот Бохумил Сейферт первый раз в нашей стране и в нашем университете, и для нас большая честь. Ну и особо любимому нашему, это Орвилл Адамсу.
I would like to say thank you to our interpreter. Thank you very much. I'd also like to point out to everybody that we are 5 minutes early. Right, so that's good. Okay. So thank you. We're finished. Thank you for your participation. Bye-bye. Wait.
Уважаемые коллеги, еще раз поздравляю вас всех с сегодняшним праздником, и всех мы приглашаем на фуршет, который состоится в 18:00. Там будет организована фотосессия крупным планом в столовой.